Hi, I'm Chris Green, the History Chap, telling the fascinating, forgotten and sometimes unfashionable stories from history which we didn't learn about at school. On the 16th of April 1879, during the Anglo Zulu War, a party of British irregular cavalry were on patrol in northwestern Zululand when they saw something shocking. Staggering towards them was a lone white man. His military uniform was ripped and his body scratched, bruised and battered, and he was babbling incoherently. Given a slug of medicinal brandy, he identified himself and told them an incredible story. He was an escaped Zulu prisoner. Captured in battle, he had been interrogated by the Zulu king himself and then dramatically escaped. But was he telling the truth, or simply telling a tall tale? This is the story of Ernest Grandier, the only European prisoner of war taken by the Zulus during the conflict. Ernest Grandier is one of those characters in the colonial forces during the Anglo Zulu War who drifts into the story and then just as quickly disappears again. In his late 20s, Grandier was born in Bordeaux, France, where he'd been a stonecutter, before emigrating to South Africa. And there he ended up joining the British Auxiliary Forces, serving in the Anglo Zulu War in 1879. In his case, a mounted unit called Weatherly's Border Force. This irregular mounted force, under the command of British officer Colonel Frederick Weatherly, had ended up attached to Colonel Evelyn Wood's No. 4 column, operating in the northwest of Zululand. When talking about the Zulu War, most people tend to focus on the British disaster, or Great Zulu Victory, depending on your view, at isandlwana, and the defence of the mission station at Rorke's Drift, as made famous in the film Zulu. However, the Zulus had also notched up 2 victories over Evelyn Wood's column as well, at Intombe and Hlobane. I've told those stories in the past and will post a link in the description below. And it's the Battle of Hlobane on the 18th of March 1879 where our story starts. A raid on the mountain stronghold of a local Zulu chief by Reivers Buller and a force of 400 mounted colonial troops turned into a near disaster when they were surprised by the main Zulu army. As the British desperately tried to get off Hlobane mountain before the Zulus encircled them, they lost 90 or a quarter of their men. Amongst the men trying to get off the mountain was Frenchman Ernest Grandier. He was one of several Frenchmen at the battle, 3 of whom were killed. He told his rescuers that as they fell back, he had placed a wounded comrade on his horse and was running alongside when a Zulu warrior grabbed his leg. Falling down, he was suddenly pinned to the ground by more warriors. He knew that they were about to wash their spears in his blood. But then something strange happened. They seized him, and instead of killing him, he was marched to the nearby kraal of Mbeleni, a Swazi dissident and ally of Zulu king cetshwayo. It was Mbeleni who had led the successful Zulu attack at Intombe, and his forces had played an active part here at Hlobane too. Having questioned Grandier without eliciting much useful information, he sent him to another Zulu leader, Mnyanmana, who decided to send their white prisoner to the Zulu king himself, cetshwayo. Having spent the night tied up to a tree amidst the victorious Zulu army, many of whom were threatening to kill him, Grandier was placed under a guard to march the 50 miles to the Zulu capital at Ulundi. His 4 guards were all mounted, and the Frenchman, who had been stripped naked, was forced to walk alongside, carrying their food. When they finally arrived at Ulundi, he was brought in front of King cetshwayo. In his mid-50s, cetshwayo had been the leader of the Zulu nation for the past 6 years. He now proceeded to interrogate Grandier through a young Dutchman who was acting as interpreter. Fundamentally, he wanted to know why the British had sought a war with him, and also the whereabouts of a Zulu prince, Hamu, who'd recently defected and had been with Buller's force at Hlobane. Grandier also told his rescuers that he was shown the guns taken at isandlwana and asked if he could work them. As a non-artillery man, the answer was no. When it became clear that he had little intelligence to offer and he couldn't work the guns, Grandier was consigned to a hut under guard, where he claimed he was fed on mealies for 4 days and was frequently beaten. After those 4 days, messengers arrived to report to the king that Mbeleni, the hero of Intombe and to whom Grandier had initially been taken to as a prisoner, had been killed in a skirmish. Upon hearing this news, cetshwayo ordered that the captive be returned to Mbelini's people to be executed, and on the 13th of April he departed the Zulu capital under the guard of 2 warriors, one of whom was armed with a rifle, the other with the traditional assegai or short stabbing spear. At about midday the party halted for a rest. As the 2 guards dozed in the warm sun, Grandier recounted that he grabbed the assegai and killed the man with the gun, and the other guard ran for his life. For the next 3 days and nights the Frenchman headed westwards towards Sir Evelyn Wood's camp at Kambula. The next day he had a nasty scare as he suddenly saw an impi or Zulu regiment heading directly for him. Actually, the impi were not looking for Grandier, but heading towards Ulundi, driving a large herd of cattle before them. The fugitive Frenchman had to stay hidden all morning as they slowly moved by. Finally, on the 16th of April, he was rescued by that irregular cavalry patrol who appeared at the start of this story. Having told them his incredible tale of capture and escape, he was taken back to Sir Evelyn Wood's camp, where he repeated his adventures to the British commander. Not surprisingly, Grandier's story spread throughout the camp at Kambula, and swiftly the journalists in the camp sought him out. His story caught the imagination of the public back in Britain. Here was a brave French soldier facing down the Zulu king and refusing to give him any intelligence, or unspiking the artillery pieces captured at Isandwana. Sensational images appeared of him, stoic and naked, defying his captors. Yet his moment in the spotlight of fame didn't last long. By the October of that year, John Colenso, Bishop of the British colony of Natal and supporter of the Zulus, was raising some doubts about Grandier's story of heroism. And he wasn't alone. The Natal Mercury carried an interview with the senior Zulu leader, Mnyamana, who had commanded the army at Hlobane. And if you recall, he was also the commander to whom Mbelini had sent Grandier, and who in turn had decided to send the prisoner to the king. His recollection of events was not quite the same as the Frenchman's. Whilst he concurred that a white man had indeed been captured and sent to cetshwayo, it was the story of Grandier's escape that he refuted. According to the Zulu, cetshwayo had not ordered him to be killed, but rather taken back as close to the British camp at Kambula as possible and released back to his own people. There never was any intention to harm him. And another Zulu witness also concurred with Mnyana's story. Which leaves us with the question: who is telling the truth about Grandier's escape? The Frenchmen or the Zulus? Even at the time, there were sceptics as to the heroics of Ernest Grandier. Amongst them was the traveller and author Bertram Mitford, who wrote the book Through Zululand in 1883, just 4 years after the war. Based upon his interviews with Zulus and others, he raised some concerns about the story. Firstly, he noted that Grandier claimed to have escaped on the first day out from Ulundi. The surviving guard would not have had to run that far to raise the alarm, and a sizable posse would no doubt have been sent after him. Those Zulus would have known the land a lot better than Grandier and could undoubtedly track him down inside 3 days. Yet Grandier never saw any signs of a pursuit. Even the impi that he came across didn't seem to be on the lookout for a fugitive. Mitford also noticed that the distance from the Zulu capital to the area where he was rescued was 50 miles as the crow flies, over rough terrain, including mountains, with no track. Was it possible, he mused, that a man on foot, without food, could really make his way across that landscape with enemy patrols searching for him in 3 days? Doing the maths, that is just over 15 miles a day. He felt that the Zulu account of events held far more water than the Frenchman's. Even Grandier's recollection of his ill treatment at the hands of the Zulus was challenged, and not just by Zulus. Do you remember the young Dutchman who acted as an interpreter? Cornelius Vane was in Zululand when the war broke out and was detained by the king. As a non-combatant, he was never regarded as a prisoner of war, but more akin to sort of like enemy aliens during, say, World War II. For a large part of the war he resided at Ulundi, and he disagreed with Grandier's recollection of his treatment, stating that rather than being beaten and half-starved, he had been supplied at the king's orders with tobacco and gin. He too claimed that the king had ordered him to be returned to his own people. The idea of the Zulu king not wanting to treat a white prisoner badly does make some sorts of sense. Despite his victories at isThe and Hlobane, cetshwayo was aware that the war was turning against him. White prisoners of war could be a useful leverage. Indeed, he was disappointed that prisoners, especially officers, hadn't been taken earlier in the war, and had ordered them to be taken at Hlobane. Now, those of you who've listened to my episode about the Battle of Hlobane might recall an incident involving Captain Robert Barton. On secondment from the Coldstream Guards, Captain Barton commanded about 150 men from the Frontier Light Horse at the battle. Managing to escape off the mountain, he rescued an injured officer, Lieutenant Poole from the Border Horse, the same unit in which Grandier was serving. Barton, carrying Poole, was chased by the Zulus for 8 miles until his horse collapsed. Poole was swiftly killed, but when Barton faced an Nduna or commander, the Zulu indicated to the British officer to surrender. But Barton tried to fire and was killed by another Zulu. And so the only prisoner taken at the Battle of Hlobane was Ernest Grandier. And even the story of his capture is not watertight. Anecdotal stories from Zulu veterans recall that rather than being tackled to the floor as he valiantly gave his horse to an injured comrade, the white man was found hiding amongst the rocks. Nevertheless, they do concur that Grandier was indeed sent to Ulundi and was brought before the king. It must have been a huge disappointment to cetshwayo to find that his only prisoner of war was a lowly colonial trooper who didn't have a clue about British strategy for the war, who didn't actually know any of the senior commanders, and hadn't got a clue how to fire the captured cannon. No wonder he decided to let him go. And here we come to one final twist in this story. There's nothing to specifically say that he didn't escape. It could have been that he was totally ignorant as to why he was being sent away from Ulundi, and he turned on his escorts, come guards. It is possible. It might also explain why the alarm wasn't raised to recapture the prisoner, because he was no longer regarded as one. So exactly what was the truth about Grandier's capture, his treatment, and his escape? We really don't know. We have Grandier's account versus various Zulu oral recollections. You take your pick as to which version you prefer to believe. And what about the man himself? Well, Ernest Grandier's star had risen from obscurity, and it faded back there too. There are no definitive records as to his life after the Anglo Zulu War. And yet, despite all the contradictions in his story, one part everyone does seem to agree upon: that Ernest Grandier was indeed captured and brought in front of the Zulu king. And that makes him the only white prisoner of war captured by the Zulus during the entire campaign. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little known story, and if you did, then you might like this one too. There's a link appearing about now. Don't forget to like, share, or become a patron of my supporters club. Thanks for joining me today. Keep well, and I'll see you again very soon.